Welcome back, everyone. In this module, we're going to be looking at Learning Objective 3.1.10, which is describing the current recommendations for a healthy, balanced diet. So in our previous modules, we looked at our different macronutrients, and that includes our lipids, our carbohydrates, and our proteins. And so in this module, we're going to be really trying to synthesize everything to create what a healthy, balanced diet would look like. And so this is a learning objective 2, and they want us to consider recommendations for our macronutrients, so that's carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, as well as our fibers, water, and salt for adults in the general population. And we also want to be looking at the relative contribution of carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. In other words, what percentage of your diet should be made up of carbohydrates, what percentage lipids, and what percentage proteins. And they want us to be looking at our monounsaturated, polyunsaturated, and saturated lipids. So if you remember what our saturated lipids were, they were our animal source lipids, and they're solid at room temperature. And then you have the unsaturated lipids, which are more liquid at room temperature, and we're looking at plant sources like oils. So in addition to that, your learning objectives or your teacher's notes have some additional things. So your theory of knowledge, and just looking at 2 other aims here. These are important for your broader study of the IB, but for this particular syllabus point itself, in terms of just learning the content, this is what we need to cover here. So 3.1.10, describe current recommendations for a healthy, balanced diet. And if you were to get an exam question on this, it would almost be phrased identically to how the syllabus point is phrased. Describe the current recommendations for a healthy, balanced diet. So our percentage distribution between our macronutrients is we want a predominant carbohydrate diet with a similar amount of fat and protein, but this will also vary depending on whether you're an endurance athlete or you're a weightlifter or you're a non-athlete. So we recommend intaking 45 to 65% carbohydrates, and it's worth knowing these numbers, 10 to 35% fat, and 20 to 35% protein with adequate water consumption. So that's your macronutrients there. Now, some exercise modes will demand more carbohydrates, like if you're an endurance athlete, we will recommend higher carbohydrate intake in addition to a substantial amount of protein, but not to the proportion that a weightlifter would be using protein. Recommendations for a healthy, balanced diet include reducing daily sodium intake and the intake of calories from solid fats and added sugars. And that's because these tend to come in quite unhealthy forms. So when you have added sugars, you run the risk of developing type 2 diabetes. And with solid fats, you risk getting hypercholesterolemia, which is high cholesterol in your body. And that's going to cause all sorts of issues with your blood vessels and your heart. Consume less than 300 milligrams of dietary cholesterol per day. So dietary cholesterol is important. Now, your body actually produces a substantial amount of its cholesterol. Now, cholesterol is important because it's used for the biosynthesis of your cell walls. So your whole body system is made up of cells. And in order to protect those cells, you need cell walls. And the cell wall is made up of cholesterol here. But when you have excess cholesterol, it starts circulating through your body. And when it starts circulating through your body, it starts getting clogged up in blood vessels, and you get injuries, you get plaques forming, and then eventually you might possibly get a stroke. Right? So consume less than 300 milligrams of dietary cholesterol per day. You want to minimize fat consumption, and the specific recommendation is to consume less than 10% of your daily energy from saturated fatty acids. So you don't want a diet that has an excess consumption of meats, especially fatty meats here. However, what you do want is a variety of protein foods. So when you choose a variety of protein foods, in other words, we're talking about you've got your red meats, your white meats, but then also things like soy, tofu, dairy, and all these different types of proteins bring in different micronutrients that kind of come with it. So milk, for example, would carry a great amount of calcium. And so by choosing a variety of protein foods, you kind of also fill those niches in terms of your micronutrients there. So choose a variety of protein foods and replace protein foods that are high in solid fats with choices that are lower in solid fats. So lean meat will tend to be better than fatty meat. We want to limit the consumption of food that contains refined grains. So what we're talking about here is white bread is not going to be as preferable as our brown bread. And that's because our brown bread tends to still contain the natural components of the wheat that, contains all the nutrients in it. Once you extract it to white bread, all you're really left with is just carbohydrates and sugar, and that's not particularly healthy. But it does taste better, but it's not as healthy. And that's why brown bread tends to cost a bit more. For adult women and adult men, there are different energy balance requirements. Now, this will vary depending on the individual, and that's why there's a significant amount of overlap there when you're looking at the figures. But generally, because adult women have, on average, a smaller size and also surface area compared to adult men, the energy balance will, or the energy balance range, or the amount of energy that you should be intaking in a day will be a bit lower for adult women. And so the energy balance ranges from 6,694 kilojoules to 10,042 kilojoules per day. Now, these figures are taken from the mark scheme of past IB exam paper, so it could be worth knowing these figures. But if you don't, just know an approximate range, that will be sufficient. For adult men, we're looking at an energy balance range of 8,364 kilojoules to 12,552 kilojoules per day. So that really sums up Learning Objective 3.1.10, which is what a healthy balanced diet would look like. The most important takeaways here are 45 to 65% carbohydrate, 10 to 35% fat, 20 to 35% protein, good amount of water intake, low sodium, reduced intake from solid fats and added sugars, have low dietary cholesterol, minimize your solid fat consumptions, and choose a variety of protein foods, and also limit refined grains. Okay, I hope you learned something today, and see you all soon in our next module. Take care.